Help support AMTV by becoming a patron, an AMTV staff member, and following us over on Twitter. Hi there guys, it's Adam Martyn here, and welcome back to another video, and today we're going to be talking about BBC2. Now, why are we talking about BBC2, do you ask? Well, you may be aware that they have a very special birthday coming up in the April of this year. The 20th of April 2024 will mark the channel's 60th anniversary on the airwaves. 60 whole years of BBC2. That's come around quick if you ask me. Some of you, particularly older viewers, you may even remember when BBC2 first went on the air. Many of you may have grown up with it in the 70s, 80s, 90s. Some of you, like me, may have been exposed to it in the 2000s, the 2010s, or even maybe the 2020s for the very first time. It's a pretty important channel in the history of UK television, certainly an important channel when it comes to terrestrial television. It was the third ever TV channel to go on the air in the UK, the second for the BBC. It was seen as a big win for the corporation, a big step forward, another channel, more programmes, more content, and a channel full of firsts as well. It was the first channel in the UK to adopt 625-line television, which was seen as an advancement of the old 405-line system that BBC One and ITV were using. You can go and check out our documentary on 405 for more info there. But also it was the first channel in the UK to switch to colour broadcasting full-time. The BBC had dabbled with colour before, as far back as the 50s, but BBC2 was the first to launch in full colour a few years into its life in 1967, with the other channels playing catch-up a few years later. So, for many reasons, including some of the programmes that have graced it, it is an iconic channel. It thoroughly deserves a big happy birthday when that time comes in April. Which might make you think, well, why are we discussing it now? Well, I wanted to come on and just sort of brainstorm some ideas. What could the BBC do to celebrate 60 years of BBC2? Well, first I think we need to analyse what they've done for anniversaries past. The 10th anniversary came in 1974, and aside from switching up the main ident, it wasn't even an anniversary ident, just a switch of the main ident. I can't seem to find any key evidence that any programmes were broadcast. I don't think there was a documentary of 10 years. There wasn't like a 10th anniversary ident. There might have been a mention, maybe in news programmes or publications of the time, but as far as I can see, the BBC themselves didn't go to any grand stops to celebrate the occasion. Now, this could be for a number of reasons. I mean, again, I think as records show, both BBC One and ITV didn't necessarily celebrate their 10 years that much on the air. And maybe anniversaries back then, because, the 60s were still in, or 60s, 70s, it's still in like the growth of television. I don't think anniversaries for channels especially were as pronounced or as celebrated as perhaps they are now. But then when you get to the 20th anniversary in 1984, they did in fact air a very special documentary called 20 Years Ago Today. Now this, as you can imagine, was looking at BBC2 20 years ago, back in 1964, detailing the creation of it, of course the havoc that was the opening night with the power cuts and the cobbled togetherness of it, which has since gone down in television history. That's a key bit of television history there. It certainly was an iconic, if not infamous, start for the brand new channel. But, that 20 years programme, that was a nice little look at where BBC2 started and where it has reached to today. Fast forward to 1994, the 30th anniversary, and we get a bunch of stuff. For one, we get a special 30th anniversary ident of a birthday cake where the 2 slams into it, which looks pretty good. But not only did we get a special ident, there was a whole evening of programmes dedicated to that particular event, all introduced by the former controller of BBC2, David Attenborough. Yes, that David Attenborough, dear viewer, but long before, whilst he was doing his nature programmes, as he's done for decades now, he used to be the controller of BBC2 way back in the early days, back in the 60s. So a nice bit of, coming together that a former controller should be presenting these sort of programmes, and they are really great. I particularly like the one about colour broadcasting and how, BBC2, again, was the forerunner into that whole thing for the UK. There were also different programmes from BBC2's life that were shown, episodes such as Elizabeth R. and The Barry Humphries Show, a documentary from 67 about politics in India at the time, and even a new episode of Call My Bluff, which had been a very successful game show on BBC2 for decades. So I think the 30th anniversary was definitely the most prolific of them so far for BBC2. But then let's jump to 2004, when it was the 40th anniversary. Now, yet again, we got a very special ident. The BBC2 logo swaps to 40 years. You see the 2s gliding about, showing previous 2 idents in there. I really love stuff like that, sort of embracing all of your history, showing what you used to look like, what you used to be, all facets of it. I really dig that style. It's a really cool sequence. And yet again, there was a brand new programme, a documentary, in fact, that aired on the anniversary date called Happy Birthday BBC2. Now, this was a big doc, mega long, very intricate, featuring several interviews from key people involved in the channel's creation, its early years, and indeed over the past 40 years. I mean, the runtime, it's crazy, is 180 minutes. It was 3 hours. This documentary was 3 hours and it went on BBC2, which is great. And I mean, it was watched by 2.43 million viewers on air date, which again, for BBC2, that's not a bad figure at all. I'd actually say that's quite impressive. But yeah, a 3-hour documentary on BBC2. BBC2 fans were eating good in 2004. And the thing is, I have seen this documentary. I didn't watch it on broadcast, but I did watch it probably around the time of the 50th anniversary, actually. And I just think it's such a shame that, I can't seem to find it on YouTube. And as far as I know, it's not available on the iPlayer. No, it's not available on the iPlayer. So I'm not really sure where you can watch this now. But from having watched it, it truly was a great documentary for BBC2. One I'd highly recommend if you can get your hands on it. And then, of course, in 2014, we had the 50th anniversary. Now, ident-wise, we got some little anniversary idents themselves, but we also got reshowings of classic idents, mainly those from the 1990s, which, let's face it, they are the most beloved BBC2 idents ever made, that entire set. Many of them got re-aired, now showcasing themselves in glorious high definition, obviously with the new BBC2 logo spinning to reveal 50 years. A really nice touch there, and very grateful as well that we got so many of those gorgeous looking sequences in HD. A real visual treat. But in terms of programs, we didn't really get much, I don't think. I mean, they re-showed Happy Birthday BBC2. This time they actually split it up. They split it into 4 parts, which, yeah, come on, for a 3-hour documentary, that is a long haul for anybody, so splitting it into 4 parts, I think, isn't a bad move. But in terms of that, I don't remember, because I would have been actively, trying to follow this, and I don't remember there being any sort of, main special programs or anything like that. It was just sort of announced, and then you have all these idents all year. That was nice that the idents did stay all year, and of course those idents stayed for a few years afterwards without the 50 years moniker, but they stuck around for quite a long time, as they did back in the 90s. So now we're up to today, the 60th anniversary, and let's be real, times for the BBC are quite hard at the minute. They're being financially squeezed at every corner, so just how could the corporation celebrate the 60th birthday in a way that would satisfy viewers and I guess themselves in celebrating their history and legacy? Well, let's start off with idents. So for 60th anniversary idents, ideally, I think it'd be great if we got some brand new original ones. Now, these could be in style of the curve idents, which have been in use since 2018. I'm not sure how you do it, but you could somehow get a 60th anniversary themed curve ident. Maybe it's made up of idents past, like the 40 years one was. Maybe there's subtle hints to a 60th anniversary, is it the diamond or platinum, whichever one that is, sort of references like that. But if not a curve, maybe it could be a brand new original concept, a one-off for sure. I'm not saying we replace the curve idents, but it could be a brand new original concept. Again, maybe bring the iconic 2 back, the sharp looking one that dominated the 90s and 2000s, and indeed a fair chunk of the 2010s, but introduce an original concept for it. I don't think there has to be many. In an ideal world, maybe introduce 4 or 5, but even if there's just one, even if there's one 60th anniversary ident that just communicates the legacy and impact of BBC2, that would be great. However, if a new ident isn't to be commissioned, I'm all for busting out the old ones. However, I don't just want it to be the 90s. As much as I love most of those 90s idents, and again, it was great seeing them in high definition, I think this would be a perfect chance to show some of those, but also dive into BBC2's ident history as well. Remaster or even recreate some of the ones as far back as the 60s. If you don't want to delve into black and white, what about the colour cube? That'd be a nice sort of throwback, or the sliding ones from the mid-70s, even the early computer-generated one from the early 80s. Really celebrate that history. Hell, even the white background too from 1986 that no one really likes. Even bring that back. That would be something. The personality twos as well. You can't forget about the personality twos. So many iconic sequences that came out of there in the early 2000s. So if we're going to reuse old idents, I'm all for it, but please, please, please don't just stick to the 90s sets. I know it's the easy option because so many of them now exist in a modern day HD format. You could just trundle out, delete the 5 and 50, type in a 6 instead for 60, but don't go with the lazy option. Remaster some more, recreate some more, or if the budget's there or the ideas are there, make a brand new 60th anniversary ident. The other thing is a new documentary. As good as Happy Birthday BBC2 is, it is now 20 years old. There is so much more history to catch up on. So a brand new original documentary to celebrate 60 years would be great. You obviously would include stuff that's been included before, like the historic launch, the early programs, the move to colour, etc., etc. But, that can be told in a much more, modern day 2020s way. It can be made probably a lot more enticing, because let's be real, people probably like you and me, we'd sit and watch all 3 hours of Happy Birthday BBC2 for all it is. But I think, to maybe attract more people to this, you could do it in a more modern sensibilities. And as much as I'd love to say make a brand new 3-hour documentary, I just don't think that's too feasible these days at the minute in television. Maybe 2 hours max, or even 90 minutes, but don't make it just an hour. I think 90 minutes would be a good length. I know that's a lot of history to cram down, but if you want to make it 3 hours, be my guest. Again, at the very least, even if they just repeat Happy Birthday BBC2, I'm not against that either, because then at the very least that gives people like me and you a whole new chance to see it. As I say, it's not readily available on any sort of streaming sites or YouTube or anything like that. So rather than watching, a bootleg copy in like 240p, the chance to see it remastered, re-shown on BBC2 again for the 60th would be great. And even add some new segments. I'm sure there are parts of that original documentary that could be trimmed here and there, just like little bits and pieces, tighten it up a bit. But yeah, some sort of commemorative program, whether it's a documentary or whatever, would be quite nice. As well as that, I think you could re-show some classic BBC2 programs or moments, similar to what they did back in 1994 for the 30th anniversary. You could show an episode from the Forsyte Saga, which was a big series for BBC2 back in the 60s, or, an episode from an iconic BBC2 show from the 70s, 80s, 90s, noughties, etc. Maybe run it across the whole birthday week from Monday to Sunday. We get a brand new episode of something from each decade. Because that actually would account for it. Monday's the 60s, Tuesday's the 70s, Wednesday the 80s, Thursday the 90s, Friday the noughties, Saturday the 10s, and then Sunday the 20s. It makes sense. BBC, it writes itself. It literally writes itself. I don't think that's out of the question at all to have like a repeat season on that birthday week. And I think the anniversary itself falls on a Saturday this year. So come on, Saturday night viewing. Prime time for something big. And also, this is more of a long shot because I don't think they'd ever do this. I don't think there's the time or budget for this now, but some kind of tie-in merchandise. I know the BBC has BBC Studios as like its more commercial arm, but as I've found from making videos about television history and like idents and stuff like that, there is an audience for this sort of stuff. Whether you release like a book on BBC2's history, or maybe some like pin badges of like classic BBC2 idents, like the 90s bunch. I think a lot of those would make great pin badges. Just anything, some tie-in merchandise to celebrate the 60th anniversary for BBC2 would be great. But again, that is like my long shot option. I don't think now, because the time I'm recording this, we're near the end of February. There's less than 2 months to go. I really don't see this happening unless it's something they can make quick. But some tie-in merchandise would be great. I know the BBC don't often do that for themselves that often, but I think, they should realise as well that a lot of people out there would adore merchandise tying in with their anniversaries, just tying in with them in general. So those are my thoughts on like how you could maybe run BBC2's 60th anniversary, celebrate the birthday week, and indeed the anniversary date itself. Obviously, I've got no inside information. BBC2 might do absolutely none of this. They might not bother to celebrate. They might just carry on as normal. At the very worst, we might just get, on the day, we might get a continuity announcer saying, oh, by the way, did you know this is 60 years of BBC2? Which is still an acknowledgement, but we've got to be prepared that there might be absolutely nothing. As I said, the BBC is squeezed. There's a lot going on. I think anniversary celebrations are a bit lower on their priority list at the minute. But I live in a hopeful world where at the very least we'll get a celebratory ident, whether that's a new one or past ones. I'm a bit dubious as to whether we're going to get a documentary. I think a rerun of Happy Birthday BBC2 is more likely. I think BBC2 classic programmes being repeated isn't out of the question because, if they've got them in the archive and they have the rights to re-air them, they can just re-air them. And as I said, merchandise is a long shot, but wouldn't that be great? Imagine rocking around wearing a version of BBC2 paint ident, like a pin version of that on your coat. That'd be so cool. But let me know all your thoughts about this week, this 60th anniversary week, in the comments down below. What do you think BBC2 should do for their 60th anniversary? Do you agree with some of the ideas I suggested? Do you have any other ideas that could work? Let me know all of that in the comments down below. If you enjoyed the video, please do leave a like on it. It really helps us out. And subscribe if you're brand new as well. We'd love to have you aboard here with us. In the meantime, I've been Adam Martyn from AMTV. Thank you for joining me, and I'll see you next time. Thank you to our patrons for helping to support the show, and a special thank you to Macra, Ethan Carberry-Holt, Bruce Danton, Globe of Reviews, Derek Chambers, Sean Knock, Dord Khan, Liam Demain, Trev Hughes, AJ Mac 200017, Deck KP20, Simon Harrison, and Evan Hart 38 are AMTV staff members.